I'm Rivka Yeker, and I am the co-host of Nerd Gaze and co-founder of Hooligan Magazine, and I'm here with Kami Garcia, who has been writing amazing adaptations of DC classic heroes like Beast Boy, Raven, and Joker and Harley. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, but we're also going to talk about nerdom and what it means to be a woman within nerdom and comics. But before we begin, I would love to know what you grew up watching or reading and what characters you identified with then.
When I was young, I have four brothers, and I have a sister, but she wasn't born until I was in college, so I feel like that doesn't count for that. I was, we watched a lot. I watched a lot of TV. We watched Saturday morning cartoons. We watched, Voltron and Super Friends. But my first love has always been Wonder Woman. So if you read the Raven book, there's a photo in the very beginning, the author's note, and a photo of me in my Wonder Woman costume. My mom made me a Wonder Woman costume. I thought Wonder Woman was a job that I could have when I grew up. And even though I loved the comics and the cartoons, Linda Carter did it for me because I thought that's the real Wonder Woman. This is a real job. There's a real woman who's Wonder Woman, and I can also be Wonder Woman. So, I always loved DC Comics. I was never like an Archie kind of person. I was always kind of like a little, on the dark side. Yeah. And, we didn't even have graphic novels or call them that back then. And then I was also a really big science fiction fan. I loved the White Mountains. I kind of graduated from Narnia and that kind of stuff right up to like Stephen King to horror and then adult sci-fi fantasy and, reading things like Hyperion and like Eternal Champion Cycle and like very nerdy very, very nerdy fantasy.
Which is why Beautiful Creatures is sort of this super fantasy, sort of dark, edgy, like romantic, erotic thing, because those are all the perfect concoction for that. So I love that. And it's interesting because I also grew up really like wanting to be edgier. And for me, it was definitely like, it made me feel smarter or like more like one of the boys for me. But it's interesting, Wonder Woman was kind of the one you were, like what made you, like, was it the like adaptation of Wonder Woman, or was it, because the original Wonder Woman is complicated.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. I was like 7 or 8. And I think part of it was that, as a boy, you could go to the store and you could buy like a Halloween costume for Superman or Batman. I also loved Batman. Like, that's who I always pretended to be if I wasn't Wonder Woman, just because I always it's weird. Wonder Woman's the only character I like that has uber powers. I tend to not like characters that have very big powers, but I feel like her otherness is what attracted me to her. I was also a very outsider. I had kind of ear hair, except for the front was super long. I had like the flock of seagulls hair, because I am much older than you. And I had super short, and then one side was shaved, and then it was very long. It was very edgy. I didn't have any clothes that weren't black. And then when I wasn't loving Wonder Woman, I remember I had like an Incredible Hulk T-shirt that I wore like all the time. And it was like just day after. My mom was like, "You need to wash your clothes. It looks like you're wearing the same clothes every day," which I was. But I think for me it was the otherness, the her not fitting in, the now I'm old enough to know it was like the immigrantness, but the coming to America as a person who didn't fit in and wasn't accepted and didn't understand all the kind of norms, because I was a person who in elementary school, I dressed like a boy pretty much. I had big pigtails because my mom, she was like, "You're going to look like a girl one way or another." But I wore, Incredible Hulk T-shirts and, Voltron and jeans and Nikes. I looked like my brothers. Yeah. And I rode a big wheel and, I gave all of my Barbies, punk hairstyles. So that was just kind of where I was coming from. And so for me, I think I always gravitated towards the thing that the people who didn't fit in, or the misfits, in novels and things. And with Beautiful Creatures, which is my first prose novel with my writing partner Margaret Stoll, who is my best friend, one of the reasons you're probably, had that reaction to it is because Beautiful Creatures wasn't written to be published. It was written for 7 teens in my fantasy book club, 2 of whom were Margie's daughters. And Margie was one of the very few women back then in video games. She started at Westwood Studios forever ago, that doesn't even exist anymore. She worked on Defender, Command and Conquer. So, and she's a hardcore nerd. Like, she was the one who's like, you need to read Hyperion and stuff again, and like gave me a chart. So, when you're writing with a fellow nerd girl and you're writing for 17s, 5 of whom were girls and 2 who were boys, but all hardcore fantasy readers, you write the thing that they want to read. So we were writing this on a dare. We just considered it a story. And we filled it with the things that we knew. And one thing that always, in the 50s, science fiction was kind of a metaphor for the scary things going on in the world. So for us, Beautiful Creatures was a way to talk about, having people be discriminated against within the magical community. We have the equivalent of, they're not really witches, we call them casters. We always say they're like the cross between the X-Men and witches. And so for us, like, that was a way to talk about, kind of before. Now everyone's talking about small towns like the South, places where, you might be progressive, but no one around you is. And that was kind of our way to talk about discrimination was, the magical people were being discriminated against within their confines, and which mirrored the way a boy in a small southern town felt, when they were banning Harry Potter and everything. Don't read Harry Potter anymore, sorry, but like, those are the things that we wanted to talk about, like this idea of of otherness again, like having a girl come in, and her biggest sin in the beginning of the book is like she reads the required books and she's a book nerd, but then you find out she's actually magical. But to the cool girls, they don't like, her biggest sin is like she doesn't dress the right way. So that's kind of what I grew up with. The like, do you have the right haircut? Do you wear the cool clothes? Do you pretend that you hate to read and try to attract boys all the time? Was that your main goal?
Oh my God, Cami, I'm sure Kurt's laughing because everything you're saying is so relatable to me right now. And like, I'm wearing a Nightwing shirt, but like Batman, yeah, that was my like my core, my beginning, my foundation. At 14, like that was it. And it's funny because I have 2 questions that are totally out of topic, but I think feed into this. Because everything you're saying is, this otherness, like being attracted to the outsider, being attracted to uplifting the outsider. It's like everything I've done in my life. And I'm curious, what is your astrology sign?
I'm an Aries.
You're an Aries. Yes, you have such fire energy.
I'm like a real Aries, not on the cusp.
Real Aries, not on the cusp, fire. And what music were you listening to during this?
Smiths, The Cure. Well, I will say I have very broad musical taste. I went from like LL Cool J, like the first album, to like the Smiths, The Cure, Psychedelic Furs. But it was interesting. So I really liked, Depeche Mode, like, oh yeah, I liked that. But then one of my brothers was into punk, so he listened to like the Circle Jerks, Dead Kennedys, Black Flag. So I also knew that music, and then I loved rap, like Dougie Fresh, old LL Cool J, Salt and Pepper. Like, so I'm from DC, and Salt and Pepper used to do shows in DC at a place called the Metro Club, a really rough place where, this was way before like Do the Right Thing, EU's from DC, like so I also listened to Go-Go, and like, so I had really broad musical taste, but I definitely looked like a Depeche Mode Cure fan. I mean, Robert Smith and I had very similar, my hair was like a little more Flock of Seagulls, but then I grew up, my mom was like, my parents got divorced when I was super young, and my mom was like the one who walked around barefoot all the time listening to Stevie Nicks.
Sure.
So like, I had a weird musical taste, but I definitely look like a kind of new wave kid.
Love it.
And I went to the 930 Club all the time, that kind of thing.
I love it. I love that so much. Yeah, that's great. I was gonna say, I was like, it makes sense. You had such a vast range of like punk, new wave. Then you got like the sad like songs from Stevie Nicks. Like, so there's the emotional like. That's
my playlists now are weird.
I would love to hear one of them. Because I'm like, okay, so if you loved rap and you loved punk, I'm like, how did you feel when new metal came out in the early thousands, like Linkin Park?
I feel like by then I was already like, I like what I like. Like it's like Social D already did that stuff better.
Right.
So like,
That's
and Public Enemy, I'm like, none of this is like that
absolutely.
great. I mean, for me, it was more traumatic when you see like Flava Flav is on like a love show with Bridget Nielsen. That's when I was like seeing Snoop Dogg with Martha Stewart's okay because like I was too old by the time he came out.
Right.
But when you see Flava Flav, like when you've seen Public Enemy in concert and then you see Flava Flav
Being
who's
like
on
totally.
a reality show, I was like, I felt like I jumped the shark.
That's probably like whiplash. They all ended up being reality stars though, some way or another.
Everyone is now except me. I'm not going to be a reality star ever.
Have it be known. Cool. Yeah, I wish we have one mic and we're both very chatty. So, but it's okay. I feel like we do. I saw this thing that was like, instead of interrupting, it's collaborative overlapping, which I was like, that is relatable to me. Yeah, we're overlappers. Cool. Well, I would love to talk more about the Beast Boy and Raven collection you're doing right now. So you had the Raven, that was the first. So I used to be a bookseller. So I was working with in Wicker Park in Chicago here. Yeah, Volumes Book Cafe. I was there for like 3 years. I also ran events and books, so know a lot about publishing. But I was seeing those books come in, and when the Raven came in, I was like, oh shit, like this is so cool, because I loved Raven as a kid, you know, who loved Teen Titans, and Raven was like the kind of outsider, you know, big outsider, queer, black hair, or not, I wouldn't say queer, but like I definitely was attuned to her. And so, yeah, I would love to know kind of like your introduction into it and how you kind of fell in love with these characters individually and now as a duo, Beast Boy and Raven. Yeah.
So I read the comics, but I was really big fan of the animated series in the 2000s. And then my kids, who are both in high school, my daughter loved Teen Titans Go. So then I ended up watching that, which, you know, is adorable. It's like not the same, but it's super cute. So I had kind of come off of this, like, Teen Titans was still very fresh in my mind. DC was looking for YA and middle grade established novelists, prose novelists, to come in and do out of continuity takes on their very realistic takes on their characters, with the agenda of bringing in new readers and also really creating, like, you know, having like a spotlight on girls, diverse characters, marginalized characters with marginalized backgrounds. So my best friend Danielle Page was doing Mira for them, and they basically said, like, will you ask Kami if she would do one? And I didn't really know much about it. I had just come off of, I wrote I generally am a fantasy writer, but I wrote a prose standalone novel about relationship violence that was inspired by something that had happened to me. And it turned out to be super miserable to write it. I mean, I'm glad I wrote it because it seems like it helps people, but it was really hard to write. I thought it wouldn't be hard to write because it's easy to talk about, but it's not the same. So I was like, I don't want to write another novel right now. I'm super stressed out. And so Danielle's like, you should do this. You love graphic novels. Like, this would be so fun. And I do love DC because I'm definitely a DC girl. I love the X-Men and Magneto, but aside from that, I'm a DC girl all the way. So I was like, okay, I'll totally talk to them. And they said, like, you know, what would you like to do? And I said, I want to do the Joker. They're like, we're not really doing that. And then I said, I want to do Wonder Woman. And they said, Laurie Hall Sanderson's already doing Wonder Woman. And I was like, okay. And I said, well, who do you need? And they said, what about Supergirl? And I was like, you don't know me yet, but I'm not capable of doing that. And so, and everyone laughs now that they know me, because they're like, we can't believe we suggested that. So then I said, like, what about Teen Titans? They're like, we would love for someone to do Teen Titans. Now, I assumed they meant Teen Titans plural. So I wrote a series pitch. It was like, you know, I wrote a pitch for origin stories for the Titans, and then a group book, and then a joke that was called Beast Boy Loves Raven, because that was like my ship. So, and that was like, I was like, bonus book. It was like nonsense. So I was like, they're never going to let me do this. But I threw it in there because I thought it sounded clever. Oh my God. So we had a big meeting, and I said basically what I want to do is I want the characters to be super relatable. I want them to wear regular clothes. I want them to look like regular teenagers, so that like if you're a fan, like you could feel like Beast Boy could be at your school and you don't know, because that's what Beautiful Creatures is, hidden in plain sight.
Right.
So, and they, and because of Beautiful Creatures, and they'd read that, they were like, you would be perfect to do Raven first because it's very Lena-esque. And I said, sure, she's my favorite. And then there was a big talk about like, do we do a group book first? And I said, listen, part of the reason why, because they said like, we've never gotten the following with the comics that we've expected because the shows are so popular. And I said, that's because you can't establish a character in 22 pages when there's 4 of them or 5 sometimes. And I said, like, you have to let the character, in YA at least, you have to let the reader get invested. So I said, let me do Beast Boy and Raven as these standalone origin stories with a tie-in where I could bring them together as part of a group later if they do well. And they were willing to roll the dice and let me do it. So then the next step was, okay, we're going to give you an artist. And they sent me a whole bunch of like portfolios and things to look at. And they were all really great. But I was like, it's like that you know it when you see it.
Yeah.
And I was like, this isn't it. And so I was like, I'm very old, so I went on Pinterest. And I was like, I was on Instagram, but not like, I didn't know how to navigate it very well still. So like I went on Pinterest and I searched Teen Titans, comics, and all this art started coming up by this guy named Piccolo, where the Teen Titans were wearing normal clothes. And I was like, this is exactly what is in my pitch.
Yep.
So I show it to DC and they're like, oh, we're aware of this guy. He's very big on Instagram and he's really talented, but he hasn't done a comic. And I was like, and I also have not done a graphic novel. So I'm like, why is that a problem? And they said, well, there's a lot of like layouts, all these steps to making a graphic novel, and like neither of you know these things. And so I said, well, I feel like he's the ticket, like he's it. This is the right person. So they said it's going to be more work because neither of you know what you're doing, but the editor will know what they're doing. So they wrote him, and the funny part was he didn't write back. So they write him again, and I was like, let me reach out to him. They're like, do not reach out to him. You are not part of the equation. Like, also, your books are really big in Brazil. Like, we want him to, like, we want him to want to do the gig. I'm like, the guy's been doing fan art for free for years. He clearly would want the gig. So I can't, and he's not following me. So I can't, like, go on. I know that if I go on Twitter, they're going to see me, like, interfering. So I'm just like, and I only say this not to be patronizing, but because I'm old enough to be his mom. I was like, kid, please answer your email. So after a while, I said, listen, I bet you he thinks it's fake. He's like 23 years old or something. Like, he thinks this is a joke, I'm sure.
Right.
So then they had an assistant write him, and he wrote back. And they said, we want to hire you to do a poster. Because I said, you're just writing him saying we want you to hire you to a graphic novel out of nowhere.
Right.
Like, he thinks this is nonsense.
Right.
And he did. He said, but the funny part about Gabriel was the thing that he thought made it look fake was the logo on the email. So they had him do a poster for ALA, for the American Library Association event, and it was of Beast Boy and Raven. It was great. And then they hired him. And so he and I, we put our chocolate and peanut butter together, and the rest was history. And it was awesome because he really got immediately. It was cool because I had the, life experience of being older and kind of, knowing what my readers liked and that sort of thing. And then he's really young and vibrant. He's ace, he's from Brazil. He's got, he travels all over to do cons. So he has this very international understanding and friends all over the world. Sure. And so it was perfect because we got to create all these original characters together. I hadn't done the whole script. So it was great because even though I had the breakdown and the outline, I was able to tailor a lot of things to what I saw that he liked and did well. Yeah. Which I think is the key a lot to art is, to me, the artist is a star in graphic novels and comics. Yeah. So yes, they need a good story, but if the art isn't good, as a reader, I'm not gonna read it. Right. So I wanted to let his, art shine through. Right. So I was kind of how do I write a script that's gonna let all the things he can do well to the forefront. But I think luckily we were already on the same page because we already both wanted them to seem like these relatable regular kids that just happen to have powers. Yeah. In case there's any artists out there, so here's the advice. So number one, on Twitter there is a hashtag called Visible Women. if you are a woman or you present as a woman. And actually, Kelly Sue was saying it's now really going to be non-binary too, because what it really is about promoting people who are marginalized in comics. It's not really about women. There's also a hashtag called Drawing While Black, where you, yes, should be black. Do not put up your work if you're not black. That's not cool. And not only do editors follow it, Kelly Sue retweets, spends the whole day when it goes up retweeting them so that they are widely seen. And I do it too. A lot of us try to help her, retweet her. And I also go through and look for ones I love. But I have a folders where I save names and artists. I have a list. I'm gonna go visit a artist alley secretly. This is how people find you now. But the one hurdle that I have come across that is the most important is you cannot just put up portraits. One of the reasons I got Gabriel is because Gabriel was putting up scenes. He would have Teen Titans, hanging out in a living room with a background and pizza and, an editor needs to see that you can draw more than figures. So if your whole Instagram is just figures and headshots, and if you actually know how to do a comic, even if it's just you do a page with 3 panels or 4 panels on your own and post it on your Instagram, those are people I can go to the editor and be like, look, they do know how to do a layout. Right. So if that is what you're trying to do, if you don't want to, I think going on Tapas or Webtoons or somewhere where you can post an actual comic is really valuable. But the most important thing is not to just do people. Because that is the killer. Because I pitch people, and I am in an anthology with DC. It's called Wonderful Women of the World. It was edited by Laura Hall Sanderson, and it's all women. The editors are women, or female presenting, or non-binary. No dudes. Sorry, guys. Everyone, the letters, the colorists, everybody. And my artist is an artist named Excel, who is Mexican, and it was her first published comic. Because we were looking for young people, but my editor went on those hashtags. So make sure that you're doing that, and make sure that it is much more important to post sequential art if that's what you want to do, than just to be posting, a billion cute characters. Yeah. Because it's hard to sell an editor to prove you can do it if you don't have it up anywhere. It's my big advice.
That's great advice.
Gabriel says that too. So
awesome.
He's not here. That's me. It's been announced, so I can tell people the 4th book. The next book is called Robin, and the next book is Dick and Damien, because Damien is my favorite Robin, and Dick is Gabriel's favorite Robin.
Dick is my favorite Robin.
But I will say, because there's been a lot of questions about it. It is not a Gotham story. It is still Dick and Damien in the context of our Teen Titans universe. So it's it's Damien joins, you see him come into the book in Beast Boy Loves Raven, and then Robin, you'll see Dick enter. So it's kind of, Beast Boy Loves Raven is the beginning of us assembling, quote unquote, a group, the Teen Titans, where you start to see the Titans coming together.
Oh my God. I'm so excited. That's awesome. And yeah, no, it's funny. I totally write Dick Grayson. I write my own world. I have my own characters, and I just decide to put Dick Grayson as a character. Kurt's read my fan fiction. But that's so cool. I can't wait to see who they end up hanging out with, and just the dynamics between them. And it's such a different world. How would you describe actually versus DC Gotham, Dick, Damien, and you don't talk about them, you can talk about Beast Boy and Raven, but how would you describe their dynamics in there versus the dynamics in your?
So one of the first things when I met with everyone at DC, it was Jim Lee, Dan DiDio, Bob Harris, who was the editor-in-chief at the time, Marie Javins, who is the editor-in-chief now, but was involved in the line, and then Michelle Wells, the head of, who was also involved in the line and became the head of the line. And one of the things they said was, Dan was like, everybody writes about Gotham and Metropolis. We would really like you to set these somewhere else. Yes. Because my books tend to have a very strong sense of place, sense of setting. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, do you have a preference? And they were all kind of like, well, what about it's in the South somewhere? Because the Beautiful Creatures series is in the South. Mm-hmm. So Raven takes place, it starts in Atlanta, and then she moves, she's a foster kid, she moves to New Orleans, which is basically my favorite city in the U.S. And then Beast Boy takes place in a small fictional town in Atlanta. Sorry, in Georgia outside of Atlanta. And then when they meet, it's in Nashville. So Gotham exists in Robin, like you see they came from Gotham, but it does, we're not in Gotham in the present tense. So I think the biggest difference is, so I got to meet Marv Wolfman, which was very intimidating, even though, because I didn't know how sweet he is. And he created Raven, Starfire, Nightwing, Cyborg. And so when I was meeting him, I said, like, is there anything you think I should do? Because obviously mine was out of continuity and very different than his Raven. And I said, you know, the most important thing to me about Raven is she's an outsider. She's half demon. She has this demon father that, you know, is like, you know, this like horrible kind of shadow in her life, a literal like and figurative demon in her life. Right. And to me, one of the things about Raven was that she wants to be part of something. She wants to fit in with someone, but she doesn't want to become a different person to do that, which is very much like Lena in Beautiful Creatures. Like I am attracted to characters that want a found. I always write found families. So I'm attracted to characters that want to belong but don't want to have to change who they are in order to do that. So, which is important to me because that's how I always kind of felt was like I wanted to have friends, but I didn't want to have to like dress like everybody else or pretend to like things I didn't like in order to fit in. So to me, one of the biggest differences is, and Beast Boy is kind of, you know, he's still a prankster and stuff, but it was important to us like that there be more than that. So one of the things that's different about Beast Boy is you really get to see kind of more of his insecurities. One of the things that we deal with in that book is body image because he's very small and he's a senior in high school and he hates the fact, not so much that he's not big or tall, although he does equate it to that, but his voice hasn't dropped. Like he hates the fact that people automatically say like, oh, are you a freshman? Like that they think he's young because to him, the combination of being skinny, small, you know, short, and like not having this deep, manly dick voice makes him seem young, and he wants to look his age. He wants people to like look at him and see he's like, oh, I'm about to be off and I'm a senior. And so like we deal with that. We deal with the fact that like he feels pressured almost to be the funny guy, you know, because that's the way he fits in and that's what keeps him, you know, like making the kind of the popular kids laugh is what keeps him kind of in, you know, fluxing between these different social groups. So for us, I think the biggest difference is Raven is still broody and like emotional and a little bit inaccessible in the beginning, but you do get to know her more. She bonds with her foster sister, Max, who is the original character we created in Raven. And so you get to see her open up. And then in Beast Boy Loves Raven, I won't say how, but there's a shared character in both of those books that's like the through line, and they both end up in Nashville for a specific reason, and then they meet accidentally. But basically, like throughout the course of that book, you see they start out, you know, as like strangers, then they become friends, and then eventually they, you know, have feelings for each other. But the important thing for us about that book was to really, you know, we didn't want it to be this book where like he crushes on Raven, she just like brushes him off and just acts super aloof throughout the whole book. We wanted it to seem like an actual relationship, but we also wanted it to seem like a healthy relationship. And then it was important to me, since Gabriel is Ace, it was also important to me that like not all of the relationship be centered around like physicality. Yeah. And also, you know, I have a 14-year-old daughter, like I would hope all of her relationships do not revolve around, you know, hooking up. Right. So we actually agree. The most intimate moments in the book, and I think the sexiest moments in the book, the most romantic moments in the book, they're not even touching. So like for me, and Gabriel obviously was like stellar at doing this, but my job, I felt like as the person writing the script was to set up these scenes for him to be able to draw, where I was describing scenarios where you could see two people being like very emotionally connected without, you know, having clothes off, kissing, touching. Because like to me, even, I'm not Ace, but I still feel like, your emotional connection to someone is what, is what your relationship is built on.
Right.
And it's, I feel like less so now in YA, but still in prose, there's so many idealized guys, there's all in relationships, like, and I feel like they do it less even with the girls. It's like all these, boys who are like super sexy, super rich, super perfect, or super like, standoffish. And I just wanted to show, it's the same kind of quota Margie and I gave ourselves for Beautiful Creatures. Like, I wanted to show a nice boy, a nice guy who's just nice to her and sweet and polite and isn't the buffest guy in the universe with the nicest car. Like, who's like a regular guy, because I feel like sometimes girls, and this also is the flip. You can have guys having this way, and also, people who are gender fluid, where you get these ideas, this idealization of like what a relationship's supposed to be. And like someone has to make grand gestures and stand outside with a radio and all this stuff. And I just wanted to show that like it could also just be like, someone buys you coffee when you can't find your wallet. Right. Somebody takes care of you when you're sick. Right. Those things are important too.
I love that. I talk about this a lot actually on our show, but like, this obsession with like creating the perfect romanticized couple.
Absolutely.
Or romanticized, yeah. Which it's just so cool, and I love this idea of like also with YA, there are weird boundaries, like with sexiness and where you want to go with that. So it's cool to like see like two young people who are like 16, 17, like building emotional connections. Like that's what we actually need as young people. I mean, like everything else comes along, but like it's really cool to witness that, because there is a huge culture of like quick hookup, like, on to the next thing, the perfect guy, or like the unattainable guy or the unattainable girl. Like, they have to be this way, that way. And so it's cool because I feel like rom-coms and everything that we've grown up with is just like convinced us of this like perfect ideal relationship. And it's actually just like not actually thinking about the dynamics or complexities of relationships. And like, they don't care about secure attachment styles. They just care that you're both good looking, and you don't even have to have anything in common. You just you have to.
There's like a connection.
A connection, right? Yeah.
So I also have done a DC Black Label book called Joker Harley Criminal Sanity for DC. It's now collected. And I just want to put it out there because it is not the typical Joker Harley story. As I usually say for my tagline, this is not a love story. It is a procedural crime thriller where Joker, I actually had a real profiler and clinical psychiatrist who was the consultant for the entire series, and wrote the special one-off with me called Secret Files. It is about a very realistic Joker who is a present-day serial killer who is, haunting Gotham, and Harley is a clinical psychiatrist who works at Arkham, but also moonlights for the GCPD as a criminal profiler. And Gordon brings her in on his tough cases and brings her in for this case. To my knowledge, this is the first time you will ever see a Harley who through the entire run there's no cleavage, there's no two-colored hair, there's no booty shorts. She's dressed like a badass chick. We spent a lot of time designing her leather jacket. She is using the skills she actually possesses in the continuity as a clinical psychiatrist to hunt the Joker. She is the protagonist. And for fans of the regular versions of Harley, the canon versions, what was important to me about Harley has never been the idea that like she's, barely wears any clothes and just acts really goofy and stuff. To me, the thing that's important about Harley is Harley's a survivor, and she's a person who can reinvent herself. So instead of an abusive relationship, in the backstory, there's a dual story in this. The backstory is seeing Joker's evolution from being a kid. And you also see some of Harley's childhood, and you realize she comes from a very abusive mother. So she's still an abuse survivor, and as someone who dealt with, relationship violence, like that was important to me. because I know the survivordom of her is what a lot of people identify with. But it was also important to me. I wanted to just let her do, like, I wanted her to do her thing. I wanted her to be a badass heroine, like, who actually is just a psychiatrist and a profiler. Like, being a profiler is cool.
Yeah.
Being able to, like, hunt down, like, the ultimate apex predator. Like, so I always say, in this, it's the flip. It's like she is hunting the Joker. And it's very, if you like crime, if you like Criminal Minds, Mindhunter, the show Hannibal, like, it is very up that alley.
Cool.
But I just think that is, for those people who, like, love Harley but kind of just, like, don't like the sometimes bimbo-ness that they present her with, it's kind of the antithesis of that.
That sounds so sick. I love that that intersection.
I was pretty shocked they let me do it.
That is pretty shocking because it's a totally different adaptation. I mean, it's like, so they don't fall in love at all, and it's just like it's as if Harley never met the Joker.
Yeah, well, so they did cross in the past, which you'll find out how. But if at all, really what it is the Joker's obsessed with her. Because number one, he's a psychopath. Right. Psychopaths are not capable of love. So what he really has is something called erotomania, which is almost like an obsession with her. But he's really only obsessed with her because she is hunting him. So he is obsessed with her because she's interested in him. It's not about her. But she definitely has she wants to hunt his ass down. That is it. She does not think he's hot. She does not think he's interesting. She thinks, his ass belongs in jail, and then that even changes. So it's pretty cool. But it is out of continuity. That's why I was able to do it.
Wow. I love that. Yeah, like, I feel like when the Harley Quinn animated series came out, I was like, I was like, this is the Harley.
Much more up that
yeah.
Than the,
sort of like self-aware Harley, where like you see Harley having a heart in a way that's like so much more nuanced than ever before. Yeah, I love the direction of Harley Quinn. This is so exciting. I'm excited for that, like, beyond belief. I love detective stuff. Well, my last question is sort of like, in the last year or two in the pandemic, people have been coming into their nerdiness and their nerdum because people have sort of like let go of this guilt around nerd stuff. I'm curious, is there anything in the last, through the pandemic that you've discovered as, not, I don't like saying guilty pleasure because I don't think anything should be a guilty pleasure, but maybe like you've really like fallen into?
I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty nerdy to start with. There are things I've kind of discovered, but not necessarily fallen into, but more just like things that, like have been, I guess, introduced to me. I think I'm reading a lot more comics and graphic novels in the last few years just because I've been writing them.
Right.
So I've been, and I've been reading a lot more indie stuff, which I love because I definitely did not read as much of that. Like, I read like Sandman and stuff that was kind of Vertigo, but I didn't read, like, I read a lot of Dark Horse, I read a lot of Image stuff, Aftershock, like lots of different publishers. And even now I'm on Tapas reading stuff and webtoons. So like, I think that is different, where I'm realizing like kind of how big the well is, how much stuff there is out there. And that is cool. I've gotten a little bit more back to sci-fi. Yeah. Since I was writing fantasy, I think I did this like deep fantasy dive for so many years. And now I'm kind of like, and I think it's also because of streaming. There's a lot of great sci-fi streaming, and I feel like that like reminded me how much I enjoy sci-fi. So I was like, I want to read, and also there's so much dystopian stuff. It's now like, we're like, we keep ruining the planet, we're like not far from.
Too much, like too meta.
Right, yeah. But I do enjoy that. I still love horror.
Yeah.
And I don't love like I like fun slasher. I don't like gratuitous kind of stuff. I like I like Stephen King, Bird Box. Yeah. Josh Mallerman's one of my favorite writers. I know him. Like, I love psychological horror and that kind of stuff. So I think I've kind of gotten more that way. But I also have, my daughter's nerdy. She's a theater nerd. And I think and my husband makes video games. So in our house, like, embracing your nerddom is kind of cool. Yeah. And I've always kind of, my kids have been going to Comic-Cons since, since like 2010 or 11. And I was going since before I even wrote books because my husband made video games. Right. So I think like in our family, cosplay is cool. Like all that stuff has a different kind of like meaning. But I also like seeing that like at my daughter's school, like her friends are excited to go to things like, Baltimore Comic Con. Like they are nerdier and they're cool with it.
Yeah.
So to me, I feel like the generations now are braver than we were.
They are braver.
And that's the part that I feel good about because I was a teacher for 17 years before I wrote anything. Well, while I was writing Beautiful Creatures, but mostly my life was about teaching, and so I spent a lot of time with young people.
Sure.
And to me, the cool thing is just seeing people embrace who they are and feel good about who they are. I mean, we also have a lot of racism. We have a lot of homophobia now. Like it's not like any of that stuff's gone, but I feel like there's more of us now. Like there's more women in comics, there's more marginalized people out there in the world, like, showing off who they are.
Yes.
So I feel like the more of us who come together in spaces like this and kind of make ourselves known and stick together, like, we have to infiltrate from within and spread our nerdiness.
Yeah, that felt really good to hear. Thanks for saying that. Yeah, this has been a pleasure. I'm so glad to have met you and talked to you. And this is just, I'm excited about everything you're putting out and everything you're going to put out. Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Kami. This was great.